I'm Güneş Güner. I've been in fashion field for almost 25 years now. So I'm working with some local Turkish brands. Besides, I work with global brands from Inditex to Nike as well. For the last 5 years, I've started mentoring the young designers who want to be in the fashion field. As following, I start working with the senior designers as well. The first month for even the big brands or the boutique brands was having the same effect. They were all panicked. The first issue was health, being safe. So no one for the first 20 days thought about the economy or the sales. But after following 2 weeks, people were quite scared about what's going to happen lately, because some of the brands who had mainly their businesses offline, of course they were locked down, but some of them who had their efficient online sessions and online stores, they had an unbelievable raise there. Some of the brands in Turkey, even they've been selling 6,000 pieces a day. The first move each brand did was to get more digital and to talk more digital, to communicate more digital, but they needed to learn so fast. So the brands who haven't made any investment into the online communication, they were a little bit too shocked and trying to learn and act in the same time. But now, after we've spent almost 2 months since we have this virus and we've been living like this, some of the global brands start acting very cool indeed. They've been trying to give some more humor to people who are locked down in the houses. It's never about the product or the sales. But this is quite rare. The majority had been working on the sales, so it was a bit not making the right communication with the consumer at home, because they were only talking about 20 or 30% of sales. In the end, the consumer had set another relationship with the ones which were talking to them nichely. It's more how organically they behaved during this pandemic. The ones that really behaved with a persona and very organically had quite warm reflections, and now they have a better relation with the consumer. Brand and the brand communication must and have to embed the 20th century tactics, really, because we have left 20th century, but still within the marketing tools and within the communication attitude, and even for the education, we are still trying to hold on to the 20th century tactics. So from Mad Men to 2020, idea of advertising, marketing is still the same. Today, I think everybody will and have to realize that through the brand communication, we can't have only one message. So I think the first important issue is they need to forget about being pretentious. I think it's more important, all the consumers, we all want to be heard and seen. So it's time to communicate on narrow scales, what do they want? How do they want? How small niche groups want to have their needed product to be served or to be delivered. Everyone needs to forget about acting and start being who they are, and using their strengths. They're gonna get to the real people. We'll be their ambassadors to talk about them, which is more significant today, that create more trust than from a kind of quote or saying of the brand indeed. And being sustainable is a kind of very widespread word. So it will show different fall downs, different attitudes from country to country indeed. The global brands who are trying to use the message of sustainability in Europe, they need to have a kind of different saying, because the people who are listening to them in France, they are more traditional. They love being French, but in Spain, they like more humor. So you cannot use the same words, the same model, the same product to set your communication in the. Yes, we all want to sustain our world to next generations, but let's look at the place where I'm in right now, Istanbul. So Eastern countries, the Middle East, they still don't mind about sustainability really, like using the sources quite effectively or trying to pass the sources to the next generation. That's not a kind of must or a kind of priority. But in UK, it's totally a kind of responsibility to carry on. So it's more important who you are talking to and seeing them, I believe. Fashion through the world wars had carried different responsibilities. And when you go for a kind of research, fashion was always the guilty child. People were always expecting it to be forgotten or like to be put on a side. But fashion is the way we live. It's one of a very important instrument of sociology. So whatever we do, however we act, creates fashion. It's not that somebody above us or like trendsetters come and say something and we do. Whatever we do turns into fashion. And I think there'll be more fashion philosophy than fashion consumption for the near future. But I'm not talking about 2025. These thoughts and like these ideas will turn into practices earliest for the beginning of 2030 probably. Definitely we will use less, but we will want more, because when you have that less products, you want multifunctioning. The products which have crease ease, which have stainless attitude, which will not stink as much as you wear them. Something which you sun dry them, they're gonna co-clean themselves within the performances of the fabrics or stuff. So I think the technology will work a lot on fabric and fabrication. And I think the fabrication is going to evolve quite differently. So probably with our denims, we'll be able to do the handstand or like do yoga or aikido. So they'll be that elastic but looking good. So we won't need that pant for work, that pant for jogging, that pant for that. We will have the smart articles so we can really do our 100 pieces. I think this will be the main effect of fashion, having less, but having lots of functionality and pragmatism in it. Regarding having more multifunctional and pragmatic collections, we need co-working teams. It will not be the only designers working on this. So designers should find database engineers and they will sit and work on like different datas and like try to make a kind of smart t-shirt with their datas into fabrication. After this pandemic lockdown, the first movement we've seen was Emerging Designers Network from UK. 3 designers decided to work together because one of them had a kind of better sourcing and the other one had a kind of better network. And they invited other designers, not only from UK, from all over the world. So I think people need to think together. We need to have diverse communities to create this. Co-working will be one of the musts that we will be following. Let's say I'm a kind of designer. I've always been in the creative fields, but I need a kind of other half, which will be smarter on engineering or even finances, which will be more practical around like mathematics and data. I had spent very small time in co-working studios. I had met more than 20 people who had been very important in my life and in my business, who inspired me, and probably in my organic world, I wouldn't bump up to them. So I think the future will merge us, the importance of co-working together. Co-working and co-creating, co-production will be the major thing that we will look forward, because none of us individually will survive without knowing the others or without working with the others. co-thinking is the most delicious, is the most efficient, is the most, I think, the top dream that we can put on the table. I think every brand had been very much into themselves and like their efficiency only, and like how they're gonna gain more money and money only. So we all forget about like being happy, being safe, being together. So even like we had a kind of smart distance to ourselves, now we are thinking to do a better world for all of us. So I think the industry will change to think of everybody, but not pretentiously, sincerely.